All right, well, coaches, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you guys here. We got the adult recess open meathead round table here. I'm excited.
I'll bring the best meathead I can. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Looking forward to being on with you guys.
Real quickly, for people that don't know who you guys are, I know I've had both of you on the podcast before, but you guys want to do a brief description of who you guys are and some things like that before we get into some of the weeds of unstructured play here.
Trevor, go ahead.
All right. I'm Trevor Harris. I've been in the industry for almost 10 years now. It's been a journey from college sports to pro sports. And now I'm in the private sector. I had my own little facility, and I'm lucky enough now to have found a home at a place called 440 Performance here in North Canton, Ohio. And just continuing the journey, man, in the industry. Nothing crazy. Just hoping to keep passing on this stuff to everybody else.
Yeah. I think for me, maybe my career has followed a little bit of mild adult or some level of adult ADHD. I do podcasts and watch my kids play, sit out in the backyard and watch birds. Coach athletes and individuals online. Yeah, worked in the NCAA as a strength coach and a track coach for a while. Realize one of the things I guess if I'm trying to define what I do, I look at like the concentric circles of maybe on one end you have pure sport and skill, and the other end you almost have tissues, training the tissues. And I'm like, where in that circle is my interest most centered? I think it's like some mix of power and skill and movement, and the joy behind that is where I'm kind of headed. So hopefully that's somewhat concise and in a good place there.
Yeah, and I think this is about our 12th podcast together. So I think yeah, people got to know who you are by now, Joel. So we got this. Trevor, right now you are training with Joel, doing the little vertical jump journey, and it's kind of sweet to watch some of these things. And one of the things you just mentioned, like literally 5 seconds before we started training, is that you are in the weeds of it right now. Like you are living and breathing the thing rather than talking about the thing. And when I talk about this story a lot. When I had the podcast, I was talking about a lot of things like with coaches like yourselves and like Rafe Kelly and bunch of Michael Zwafel coaches that were giving me these ideas, giving me these philosophies, but I wasn't living and breathing it yet, right? Like I was kind of tinkering with it. And COVID happened, and I was forced into this unstructured training type model, this play-based model, this open movement-based model. And I really had to start living and breathing some of the philosophies that I was talking about, some of the philosophies that I was thinking about. And it was such a wild shift of experiencing the knowledge and knowing the knowledge, right? And I would be interested to hear kind of that journey for yourself and what that's been like now that you're like living and breathing it on this vertical jump journey.
Yeah, you said it best. Like experiencing it's been the coolest thing because you think you know it until you go try to run fast. And then you're like, holy shit, like I'm slow. Like I'm running a 1-2 fly 10, yet I'm coaching, this baseball guy that's running a 6.5 60. So for me, and two, I've always loved the little things. I've never run away from the complexity and the nuance. I've kind of always run towards it. And I know in this time of play based and making things simple, but to me it was, if I can understand deeper and deeper, and then it'll come out simpler to the people that I'm talking to. So that's been the big driver and why I started working with Joel. Man, it's been over 2 years now. And it's taken my level of knowledge to it's exponential, man. Like the first 8 years of my career, like were awesome and you got that like beginner's growth. But then these last 2 years of actually doing this shit and feeling it and going through every rep and really connecting with it, exponential. And it's everything. It's your programming, it's how you observe the athletes you're working with. It's the thing you felt, but maybe it didn't work. Now I can go to this guy who has the same problem, boom, and like I have a solution. Like the solutions they're easier to come by. The thinking process is a lot, like it's quicker. Like I can compute things quicker. I can have an intervention that might mean something instead of going through 5 drills. Maybe it's just getting to one drill. And so like that's just been the coolest thing, is like just to be able to feel this stuff and make these connections in the training. And it's like, and then you blend it. You take all the stuff you've learned and now you're doing it and you're in the training, you're in your session and you have these thoughts that you talk about it, Austin, too, like the aha moment. And it's like, boom, there's one. And I've noticed that's happening more and more. like, oh, that's an idea. That's an idea. Let's see if it works. And then you're kind of playing too. And there's like the play aspect of that. So do you want me to like kind of keep going into the vertical stuff?
Sure.
Like in the
Yeah, let's hear
dunking?
it.
Yeah, that's probably been the coolest thing, Joel. This spring, we Joel kind of put together. It's called Springbok. The animals that just bounce around, man. And being a former power lifter, I lost a ton of elastic ability. Just Joel can tell you from my videos, we could pull them up. It was pretty embarrassing how bad it was. But it's gotten a lot better. So the vertical jump thing, we started, a ton of bounding, standing triple jumps, standing 5 jumps, and then our speed sessions, are combining short sprints with some longer sprints and just getting all these contacts in. And one day I was at the track and they have the playground hoops right there, and we were doing the bounding, and I've always struggled with kind of keeping speed into a jump. Like I would stutter step. I would take 150 stutter steps before I jumped. And it was like, dude, what are we doing here? So I had the thought of like, okay, bounding, that idea of like getting into the penultimate and setting up the collision and getting off the ground. And like the first day after we did, I think it was like a standing 5 jump. I went over and dunked, and I was like, whoa, this is different. Like I was able to keep speed into a jump and that kind of thing. And then so it was getting better. And so that's been my thing on Saturdays. It's just been like measuring my dunk ability. And it's a tennis ball. Like I get it. I'm not throwing down a basketball. I get it. But I'm 31, man. I got 2 kids. I'm stressed out to the max all the time. But anyway, so the coolest thing ever was coming back now. It's been, I don't know, 5, 6 weeks. And we did a standing 10 jump. And first of all, I set my cones at like 85 feet because I'm like, there's no way I'm getting in the 90s. And I freaking blew past that. It was just a really good training day. And I went over to the hoops. And my first dunk, dude, I jumped up and grabbed the rim and hung on it. Never have done that in my life, ever. Even, like it was. And so it's just been this like super cool thing of, the bounding. And I think I told Joel about this in an email, was like how it feels, the feeling you get from all this bounding work, this elastic type work, and then using that and connecting it to a dunk. So that kind of comes full circle to what I've been talking about, of taking all these inputs that I've learned through the training and then having that aha moment, like, ooh, bounding. Okay, that's kind of similar to taking off. Let's go try it. And it's worked so far. And hopefully now we can maybe we'll dunk a basketball here soon.
Get a full though. I went through that whole basketball dunking journey, and it's one of the most addicting journeys I was on, dude. I was on the basketball court for like 3 hours a day, just trying to like, especially when I got close to dunking one, dude. There was like 4 days in a row where I was just like missing it a tiny bit, and I sat on that court so long, getting so much jump volume in. But Joel, one of the things that I saw you post, and I really like your thought processes here, is like the cheetah versus the gorilla training styles. You do have somebody like Trevor, you have somebody like myself who is probably more of the gorilla, or has at least trained themselves into more of a gorilla. What's kind of your thought process when you're working with a gorilla versus a cheetah? And how much room do you have to change from a gorilla to a cheetah? Because I have seen shifts in myself, and I have seen shifts in people like Trevor, but I also know like I handle weights better than like a truly elastic athlete. Is that something that you're trying to change somebody from a gorilla to a cheetah, or from a cheetah to a gorilla based off their needs? Is that totally changeable? Is that more genetic based? Like what's kind of your thought process when you're working with more of the gorilla style athletes?
Yeah, and that's one that is still a challenge to me, in the sense of like having this endless curiosity, because like Trevor talked about experiencing things like your infrasternal angle, or the angle that your rib cage makes below your chest, essentially. That doesn't really change, versus the other elements of the shape of your rib cage can. Like if you do a crap ton of bench press, you start to kind of get squished front to back. Imagine if someone's pushing you from the back and the front at the same time. And you can see those types of athletes who have done a lot of it. They kind of look like they're walking around like with a I don't know, a stick like connecting their shoulders, and they're very narrow from front to back. But that infrasternal angle doesn't change very much. So that kind of that's your set point. It defines a lot of things of how you grow and adapt and what movement preferences you have. And you can make changes without question. Like if I take a narrow or a kangaroo and I train them like a gorilla, they're going to start taking on characteristics more like a gorilla, but they're not going to do it as well as a gorilla. Same thing with if you take a gorilla and you train them very elastically, Well, in a sense, actually, that's not, as long as they can adapt to it, and if their sport demands that, that's actually a good thing. But that also just happens in sport automatically in many senses of the word. I think many great athletes have had gorilla type characteristics and then just played and were beasts. You could say like a Bo Jackson type. Um, but for me, it's been a challenge to learn how to train the true gorilla, because I've my whole life been in a body that's like, okay, this is elastic training. This makes sense. This feels good. You have those moments of like I call them a Satori moment, where you train, 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 and then it's like, aha, like you figure that thing out and that process repeats itself. Jay Schrader on a podcast said something once about, and sometimes I feel like Jay can be a little bit of an exaggerator with things, but I can understand this, and I feel where he's coming from is he says when he writes a program, he puts himself in the shoes of the client. Like basically, what is it like to be this person? And so for me, writing elastic programs is very second nature, and writing track and field jumps programs and all these things. And honestly, a lot of the athletes in Olympic sports at universities are narrows and elastics more so. It's not like if you're not training the football team, you're going to be training, as I've seen it, probably more narrow and elastic people than true wide ISA gorillas. You certainly do get some of those without question, but I do think it's beneficial to have that slant. Football, different story, or rugby, positions, different story. Long story short is I've had to work harder to understand what is it like to be the gorilla. And Bill Hartman on my own podcast said something that will always stick with me. It's like doing a banded box squat. It's like that, or even sometimes too, I'll get into a squatty run position and exhale really hard. Or when I'm doing a medicine ball run, holding a medicine ball or hugging a medicine ball around my chest, which I have you to thank for, by the way, Austin. It was either you or James up from T3 in Cleveland that I first saw that or heard about that from. And when I do the medicine ball run and hug that, I feel exhalation in my acceleration, like, and I'm like, this must be what a wide feels like. And so if I was this, what would I like? And so it's just been that process of like, so for example, when I do train a wider ISA, someone who has that natural ability, I have to respect that superpower. And so some of the things I tend to prefer would be more along the lines of those banded box squats. Or if it's sled sprints, maybe we'll hug a medicine ball and do sled sprints. I do that for narrows as well, but I find that's something wides can really resonate with well. I'll do less bounding and intensive plyometrics, basically more chances to really express force powerfully. And so in my own program, Trevor mentioned the program that we're on, we call it Springbok. And I love the I guess it's called anthropomorphization. I probably messed something up in the middle there. But basically like this idea of an animal, and that almost filtering into the nuances of your program, which I think is really cool, having that picture and that feeling in your head. My gorilla program, I just call that one, the main one I call Thor. And so that's like, there's the Thor program that I build off of in that template. So long story short, the true narrows get a lot more plyometric work or true plyometric work, and the wides get a lot more true force production work, like banded box squat type intensive stimuli as a main driver. I also will use more like overcoming isos for the Thor types. I'll use a little bit occasionally for narrows too, but more chances to feel strong isos, feel intensity, feel the force development, and use that as a potentiator as well. So it's definitely been more of a challenge for me, but that's the fun part in coaching, is trying to find your way to put yourself in the shoes of those people you are working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I thought was really cool, because I thought it was more stuck in stone than it actually was when I was looking at gorillas versus cheetahs, until I saw my buddy Mark Dowdle transition from an All-American outside linebacker, where everything was like horizontal force, like the dude with like shin angles were crazy. And now he's a massive ultra runner. And he just finished this challenge where he was running the calendar club. So it's like the amount of days in the month, that's how many miles he has. So like it's May 29th today, you had 29 miles today. Tomorrow you'd have 30. Day after you'd have 31. And he did that for an entire year. So dude, like the ends of it was freaking insane. You had like 10,000. It was some insane amount of miles throughout the year. But what I saw there, I like, it should have been a study. It should have been an exercise science study of this dude's body just completely adapting to the stimulus that was given to it. Like just completely, like a completely different athlete. He used to run with this like explosive, like shin angle, like a Darian Barr would love it. He's falling when he's running. He's very athletic. He's very bendy. And now when he runs, it's very like bound. And this is when he sprints. Like it's not when he's running versus sprinting. It's like when he sprints now, it's a super vertical, bouncy, like everything is bouncy to survive rather than that massive shin angle. And it's been really cool to just watch a live, like it's a real life, almost like Russian, old school Russian experiment of, oh, what would happen if we just ran this guy every single day? But it's crazy how much the body does adapt to the stimulus that gets into it. And one of the things I see there is running. It's he's able to do it with running because you're able to get an insane amount of volume at a decently low intensity central nervous system wise. So he's able to get that volume without just breaking himself. So he's able to create that change. Whereas if you're trying to get more bouncy, like you're talking about with the gorillas, I notice if I do a ton of bounds or a ton of hops, especially out of nowhere, I definitely get flare ups and I start to like get beat up real quickly. So it's like trying to find the balance of getting that stimulus in with a volume that allows you to get that change. And obviously a big part of that's just time, like giving myself a long period of time to do those. But it was really sweet to watch him transition. I wouldn't even say to a cheetah. I would say more to like a turtle. But it's cool to cool to see that like how quickly the body can adapt to this stimulus that you're giving it.
Yeah, maybe a husky. I was trying to think of what animal, like something that could like elastically cover long distances. Although huskies are pretty fast, I'm sure, straight up too.
Oh yeah, those things can cook too. They love sprinting after things. So you were talking about less bounds for a gorilla type athlete, and one of the things that like this, I've been thinking about this too. It's like you also need to give them not less bounds than a cheetah athlete, but more bounds than what they've been given, right? Because that is the low hanging fruit. That is the stimulus that they're not given. So how do you kind of approach that with a gorilla athlete to where you are giving them the thing that they suck at while still giving them the feeling of feeling strong to where like you're, because
Mhm.
what they suck at is that a lot, like how do you make a gorilla bouncy, I should say, like what's your kind of thought process there?
Yeah, I think no matter who you are, and Trevor, I'd be curious your take on this, but like 5-minute calf jumps, like anybody can do that. It doesn't, I don't think it matters who you are because it's not intense enough like a standing, 5 jumps or a standing 3 jumps or a 3 jumps on one leg with a roll in. Like those are things that come naturally to a gazelle type person. They have less of an on ramp where they're going to be flowing with that stuff. But I think no matter who you are, and I take so much, I mentioned Jay Schreier, I take so much in the concepts that he put forth. It's just something that's that simple. Like these low intensity bounces, I think it's the same thing with the long distance running is it's a bunch of low intensity bounces. The question becomes, all right, when does this threshold hit where, okay, now that is too much for that person. Now that does go beyond their innate timing, rhythm, whatever their total fascial structure, whatever is adapted to. But I think everybody can start there easily, and especially a wide can start there. And you have all the little extensives and hops and things. I like keeping that piece simple. And obviously, even a short, heavy sled sprint is going to have elasticity to it. After step one, you have a lot more elasticity than you think. Playing a game, you have a lot of elasticity. So if you can just do a 5-minute calf jump, like Russian lunges and those kind of things, there's elasticity in those, even in the ankle contacts as the ankles come down. So starting from those simple points and playing sport and moving outward along with the bread and butter training. And I also think too, one of the things I love that Tim Anderson said on my own podcast, I think how Tim, if you want to talk yin and yang, how Tim approaches weak points is amazing because he always says everybody starts with good. You start with good. And I think we all think about in our own experiences, what if you had a coach when you were 16, 18, 20 saying, man, that weak point of yours sucks. Like we got to bring that shit up. You know what I'm saying? Like there's just something about that I don't know. Like I think there's such a beauty in the purity of how the body does adapt. And so starting with good and then, hey, here's this thing, let's get better at this thing. And it's just how you frame it. So those are the things I would look to start with for somebody who is not a plyometric adept.
Yeah, and I love the way that you said frame it too. And one of the things you said before was calling the gorilla their power is a superpower too. Like I think it's not a dumb body, it's not a broken body, it's not a bad body. It's a body that, or it's a bad stimulus, or not even a bad stimulus, but it's just like the body is figuring out how to solve the movement problems you are giving it at a much better pace than you think. You're just giving it the wrong movement problems if you want a different goal. Like if you want a different result, like Mark Duddle wanted to become a better long distance runner. When he started, he had a bunch of stimulus of he's going to be an explosive rabbit type athlete, cheetah type athlete. And so he wasn't a very good long distance runner to start, right? And he was taking like last place at a bunch of these runs. And this is one of the cool things. Sorry, I'll stop with this case study after this, but he had ran this ultra backyard ultra over and over again. He ran it 4 or 5 years in a row. And I think he took like 7th, like 4 years in a row. did this calendar club and he won it. And he was talking to me about the calendar club, and he loves the mindset piece of everything. But he's like, yeah, dude, I just went in with a totally different mindset and all these things. And like that part's great. I agree. Like it probably mindset's beat, but I was like, also, dude, your volume you had going into that like training, like you totally just morphed your body and gave it a better movement problem to solve the movement problems in the future that you want to do. And your body changed to become a better solver of that movement problem, which is just repetitive steps over and over again. And I was like, the mindset, yes, but the volume and the stimulus that you gave your body, like just completely changed how you run. And that probably has a lot more to do with why you won that race than the mindset piece to it. But it was just super cool to see him using and changing his superpower, right? It's not that one thing is worse or bad, but if you do want a different outcome, you want to move in a different way, you want to solve the movement problem in a better way for your sport, for the constraints of your sport, then you should probably change the movement problems that you're giving it. And I don't think it's a dumb body. I don't think it's a broken body. I think it's a broken movement problem stimulus. And I think that can get to kind of the goal of this podcast, which is talking about that unstructured play, because we talk about like 5 minutes of hopping in a row. Like one of the things I remember you used to see all the time is like hopscotch, jump ropes, like all these things on a recess, like that would happen. And they just don't happen anymore. And they didn't even happen. And this is the thing, they didn't even happen when I was growing up. Like we got recess taken away. I remember in like 5th or 6th grade, we stopped doing recess and like we stopped doing any of this jumping. So it's like all these elastic components, all these game-based movements that we were getting in, like we weren't even getting in past the 5th or 6th grade. We were already being put into this pyramid of or structured play that you posted on your Instagram story, where at the very bottom you have competition and then lifting and all these NOS-based things to try to get us somewhere as fast as possible rather than focusing on the long-term development of these athletes. And that's one piece of the puzzle that I think is just not talked about enough. It's like we do have a lost world of unstructured training. We do have a lost world of hopscotch. We do have a lost world of jump roping, like of these natural elastic based things that a lot of these athletes were probably getting in on the playground that we just are not getting in anymore. So you do have to structure the unstructuredness of training, or do you have to structure the piece that we are missing from our growing up, like from our adolescence that we should have had. So I'd like to hear you guys' kind of thoughts on that. And why do you think we did lose that kind of unstructured spot in training? Like, where did we go wrong? What happened there?
Yeah. Trevor, you want to go first here? And then because I'll say way too much. So please go before I do.
So, all right, just having kind of been around, and I hate to do this, but like demonize one thing, but I've been around the baseball world a lot. And that's just one case. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but it kind of is a microcosm. And these are just my thoughts is like, growing up, all we did was play. All we did was play. We didn't have adults around. No one told us to go play. My favorite story is like I lived on a hill like this, pretty much freaking straight down. And dude, we would play baseball where home plate was at the bottom of the hill and second base was at the top. And so you hit and then you'd play baseball with a tennis racket and a tennis ball. And it's like, so you got to think like your sprint to first and second base is uphill and like slanted, like a slant board. And then from second to home, you're flying downhill and, you're chasing the ball, you're jumping the fence or going through the gate to grab it. And then the other thing I've been thinking about with that is like our games were so competitive. Like when me and my friends were playing, there might be fistfights, it's yelling and screaming, whatever. But like every game in the backyard was game 7. And I think that means something because then when we got to school ball, there was a reason, I think our class in high school was very good. Like, we had very good success in baseball, football, and basketball, me and our buddies. But now what you see is like I see it in our neighborhood when the kids are playing basketball, let's just say, it's just kind of like, all right, here's a layup. It's like, dude, like you're not playing. Like you guys are shooting around and you wonder why there's no, like what's missing. And then you watch them in school ball and then you throw in the showcase stuff. Everybody's got a coach, everybody's got a guru, that kind of thing. That, and you guys have both talked about this 1,000 times and it's like, but you don't get the ability to, like I was left-handed, but I play shortstop. You're not going to play shortstop as a left-handed, person in school baseball. But in the backyard, I was making backhanded plays. You have to spin and throw it. You're throwing sidearm. You're playing pickle. You're playing rundown, like those kinds of things where it's intense. That's a 5-10-5 just extended. I just see it, man. It's just crazy. It's just so dumbed down that everyone's just chasing, like, and Joel, I don't know if you said it right before the podcast, but like everyone's just chasing these metrics of my exit velocity, you know. And Austin, I know you're on hit tracks, but your exit velocity, your launch angle, and yeah, that stuff's important, I'm sure, at a level, but not for a 12-year-old. Like, dude, that kid, have you watched a 12-year-old swing? More than likely, I don't care how good you are, it stinks. But no one wants to say that. Like, no one wants to say, dude, 8-year-old basketball, I don't care if it's the national championship 8U AAU basketball game, dude, you stink. Like, 8-year-olds stink. Like, it is what it is. And we've lost it, man. Like, we've lost it so much.
Well,
That element.
Baseball is fucking wild too, because it's like you talked about how if you're a lefty, you're not playing shortstop. Like how quickly you are siloed into a specific position is wild. I would talk. So I just got this intern. He's originally from Canada and pitches in Maryland. I was asking him like, how did you become a pitcher? Like all these things. He's like, I loved infield. Dude, he had one bad day hitting at this like showcase. Like it was just a Canadian showcase, right? He had one bad day hitting. He said he had played shortstop, like had done all these things for his entire life when he was like 14, up till 14 at the showcase. He had one bad day. It's like, yeah, dude, like you're not a hitter, you're gonna pitch at 14. And based off one day of this showcase, it wasn't like these were high school coaches that knew who he was. It was like random showcase. They're like, you're gonna be a pitcher only at 14. Like how fucking wild is that, guys? Like you base your entire metric. But then I think back to I thought baseball was crazy like that, but I think back to like football. Dude, it's like the first overweight chunky kid in 4th grade is getting told you're only playing offensive line. It's like it's insane. Like have you seen how 4th graders grow up? Like most 4th graders that are chunky don't end up being just the chunky husker like when they're senior. Like the body's changed. Like some dudes grow 3 feet from that time and some dudes stays like it's just a wild like cataclysm of like siloing in to get the quickest amount of performance. It's like, yeah, the Canadian 14U team might win more games in that moment on that day if you're just pitching on that day. But how about the rest of that dude's life where he probably like I watched his swing. He's a good hitter, dude. Like he has a good swing, he has explosive hips. And he swears he can field. We're gonna find out tonight. He's coming out to his first softball game tonight. So we'll see if that's all talk or not. But it's like it's just such a crazy like thought process of how we silo kids not only into like select games but into select positions of certain sports. It's like it's not even the sport itself anymore. It's like that specific position is what you need to become a master of after 12 years old. It's like what are we talking about? You shouldn't even be specializing in one sport at that age. And we're not specializing in one sport, we're specializing in one position of one sport.
That's what I was gonna say. Last thing is like with that is then like you watch these guys that are like, dude, we didn't have POs, we didn't have pitcher onlys. I don't know if I knew any pitcher onlys really until maybe high school. Maybe, and then they just found out, hey, I'm just not good enough to hit or whatever, but I can throw a baseball. Like nowadays, dude, I see 15, 16-year-olds, they haven't done anything but pitch, just like you're saying. And then if you think about it, they're not doing anything else. Like, well, I don't have to sprint, I don't have to jump, I don't have to do anything. So what do? They do all the freaking pitching drills, water bag this, water bag that, specific drill, plyo ball this, and that's it. And lift weights. Oh, but they lift weights too. And then, dude, that's it. And then you ask them, we do a little game or we sprint, and it's like a fish out of water. And you're just like, oh my gosh, dude, like go play basketball, like twice a week with your friends. So you see that side of it too, where then that's all they do because that's how you get the scholarship. And and the consequences of just doing that and all the stuff you're missing out.
Joel, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a lot.
Let's go.
But I love what you guys were saying. I mean, I'm 100%. Actually, Trevor, something you had said was every game like Game 7. There was an email from I mentioned Billy Oppenheimer a few times, I think, on my own podcast. I think he was a writer for Ryan Holiday for a while, and he has a really great newsletter. It has a lot of sports anecdotes. So I'm like, it's so good. And he was talking about Tom Brady. And I mean, Tom Brady's, I think he was noted soundbite for saying that players aren't as skilled as they used to be. I would love to get more into that conversation too. But Tom, there was an anecdote, or Billy wrote about when Tom was at Michigan. He was like the 3rd string quarterback when he started there, something like that. And he just wasn't getting the reps. And he's like, how do I get the reps? And I think he had a mentor or some assistant coach or somebody was like, basically it was like every time you get on the field, even if it's 2 times in the whole practice, it's Game 7, it's the Super Bowl. You're going to go out there and it's the Super Bowl. And yeah, to your point, Trevor, I mean, and again, I think some kids, it is interesting because I observe the same thing that you do. I love my neighborhood because there's kids, a lot of kids out playing, far more than there ever were in Berkeley. When I was in Berkeley, California, I didn't see any kids out playing ever. Granted, it was a little less safe than where I am now, especially in the area of town I was, but I don't know if they were all like coding or coding school. I don't know what the kids were doing there. It was great to see kids out, but I will say like the kids, a lot of the kids here, it's kind of almost more like goofing around than it is like this is game 7. But I don't think every child is meant to be a game, like a Tom Brady or have that mentality. That's why Tom Brady ended up where he did. I'm sure, Trevor, that's a huge reason that you ended up playing on the level you ended up playing at. And I think there's so much to be found in just how kids choose to play on their own. And you can't make a kid, you can't make a kid necessarily carry like a killer instinct or be super competitive in that way. But I do think you can grow the environment that facilitates good habits. And I think a lot of that's what people see from their parents or from their peer groups. And there's just a lot. Frank Ferencich talks about the long body. There's kind of like the short body and the long body. And the long body of an athlete, it's like he uses, I think, a tree. It's literally everything. It's your family. It's your community. It's the food you eat. It's where the food came from. It's what does your country think of this sport? Like all those things make you. It's not just one thing. And so to zoom out and say, why don't kids play? I think a big place to start, because I know Tommy John, when he was on my podcast back in the day, his interest back at that point was really youth sports. And he always said it's a problem with everything. And I think we're starting to label that problem with everything. It's the meta crisis. I don't want to trail off on that. I've been listening to a lot of interesting podcasts on that to try to understand this predicament we're in. But I think, and the meta crisis is like our financial systems, the food system, our health, mental health, like all these systems, right, that are that have become over leveraged and are on the verge of collapse. Or you could even say data and AI and where that's headed. And so I think it goes down to, in the world of sport, Jordan Peterson said something that I really thought was interesting. And basically it's that parents are not having as many kids anymore. We could look at one of the things in the crisis is people don't have as many kids as they used to. I think there's a lot of countries where there's a serious population decline. Europe, the US is still on its way up, but it'll be declining in 2050, 2060. But people don't have as many kids. And Jordan Peterson was saying, because people don't have as many kids, they're more hyper protective of the kids they have. It's like, and I was talking with a neighbor of mine, and I do see that pretty regularly. You see kids going out to play, but they're trailed by a parent, oftentimes. It's usually like the parents going with. But if you have 10 kids, you can't do that. But you also you just don't hyper value. Obviously you value your children, but you don't hyper value them. And so it's this combination of this hyper valuing. We've adapted ourselves to indoor living. I think that's a big thing too. It's that where I mentioned the parents, do the parents get outside and play? Or, no, you see your parents are inside and everyone is inside. And so you're inside, and then you're also hyper protected, hyper valued. Families aren't as big. And there's something, one of my neighbors, they have 9 kids, and I hang out with them pretty regularly. And I talked to him about this. I'm like, I think our modern sports system kind of has evolved for the parents who have 2 or 3 kids and have means. You know what I'm saying? And then there's the carrot at the end of the stick. That's the college scholarship. And if we look at athlete development as a tree, the roots and the trunk and the branches, everyone's just looking to those top branches. That's the only thing they look at. Oh, I got to get that college scholarship. What can I put little Timmy or little Susie in to get them that thing? Even a well-rounded development, even if it's overvaluing lifting numbers or my facility. Oh man, we build great vertical jumps and 40s here. It's but you're not looking at the roots. You're not looking at that whole long body systemic play base. It's yes, those things are good. Vertical jump and speed is great, but are you building out the entire athlete? And beyond that, there's only so much you can influence. It's family and community. And so I do think the problem is systemic. But I think that's why Trevor, I love the Backyard Sports League that you have been doing so much. Because I look at what's the solution to this? Well, I don't think it's an easy solution, but I think one is it's almost like you're going around that system that everyone just looks at, that train. Well, even like you mentioned, Austin, with football. Oh, well, you got to play lineman now because that's what you're going to do at the top of the tree, right? And it's a way around that system. And so I think it's fundamentally, it's you can't overcome a problem with the same thinking that created it. And I think the new layer of thinking is something that actually plays by a little bit different rules.
Mm. There's so many good points I want to touch on there. One of the things that you mentioned at the very start of that rant was the like looking at the outside influences and things that people don't think about. And one of the things that you said that I thought was interesting was the how your country values the sport or what they value based off. And you see this, I'm watching the NBA playoffs right now because the T-Wolves are in it. Wolves in 7, let's go.
Yeah.
The European killer versus the American killer, and just how much these European guys are just getting ripped on by just, I think, dumb American sports commentators like Luca and why am I blanking on the Nuggets guy? Oh my God.
Jokic?
Jokic, yeah, my goodness. But like they just get ripped on like, oh, they don't care. It's like I was like, dude, they're like champions and the best in our league. They just are approaching it and value it and show their value for the sport in a totally different way than the American culture, because of where they were raised and growing up. But it's like those dudes are killers, and every single one of you ripping on them would absolutely take them on your team. It's like it's kind of this weird insanity. I just hear these sports guys talk, and it's like you're saying he doesn't want it. He's like multiple time MVP, right? You're saying Luca doesn't want it. I'm watching him just dunk on my T-Wolves right now. I'm like, I promised you he wants it, dude. Like, what are we saying in this setting? It's just their influence is going into it, but we don't want to take the 2 steps removed and just look at the value of their sport or even just how they show that value and what it means to them. But it's like nobody goes through that amount of work and effort to be the player that they become because they don't like the sport. Like it's insanity.
That was a big thing when I was in pro baseball. I got to spend 15 days in the Dominican. And you talk about, man, you talk about kids that love playing the game and they play the game with that love, like expressing it. Dude, insane. That was like one of the first things I brought back to my college guys when I came back and was like around them was like, dude, you guys are like miserable here. Like it's miserable to watch you guys talk and be around baseball. And yet, these 16-year-old kids, dude, they loved it. So you talk about just like that culture. And then walking into a locker room in the DR, the coaches, as soon as you walk in, 6 in the morning, Latin music just blaring, dude. Dudes are all in a good mood, whatever, and it carried the rest of the day. Like you were in such a great mood, and then here you walk into a locker room, and it's just like, all right, time to go to work, boys. Here we go. So that was really cool. Just like to go off of your cultural reference, like even in the DR, man, those kids love baseball. They play with that love. They express it. It's just like it's not work to them, even though it might someday become work. But like at the beginning, the roots of it is love. It's just pure love, and it's really cool.
Well, and then that goes back to Joel's point about the tree and like what's at the top of the tree for these athletes, right? Like, and I think this is where I think we're totally missing the point of sports and athletic development. It's like at the end of the day, it's so they can live a long, happy, successful life with a body that can move, right? That should be every single one of our goals, like, regardless of a scholarship, regardless of anything. Like that is your goal. And we were talking about this before, but like I just listened to these guys talk about like the dangers of AI right now, and what they're finding with AI is their goal with AI, like the human goal of AI, and this should be everybody's goal, is to like have it be a tool to expedite how better our lives could be. Like it should just be a massive tool to make humanity better. But they don't know how to put that goal into this AI system, right? So what they're finding is these other sub goals that they think are eventually going to lead to this goal are taking over. So it's just like we do in sports performance. It's like our goal is to have a happy, healthy, functioning human body. To get there, maybe we focus on speed. To get there, maybe we focus on vertical. To get there, maybe we focus on the fastest way to get the scholarship. And once you realize is this Goodhart law is like that goal in and of itself stops being a measure of being a happy, functioning, athletic human body. And it turns into how can I jump the highest, the fastest in the fastest possible time, right? And you totally negate the thing that the original goal, the original top of the tree, which was this functioning body, and you start to focus on one specific branch or one specific route of human performance. And again, we get lost in our own sauce. I talk about this all the time. It's like we never come back out to reality. We never come back. Like we use that goal, we use these systems to make sense of things, which is great, but we never come back out to reality to actually look at what should our actual goal be. And just like AI is kind of on this downhill like rampage to like take over and just accomplish the goal. It's like I got to do the goal because it's what I was programmed to do. I don't think humans are much different. It's like we were put in this head, like we were told we need a higher vertical and we just obsess over it. We need to go do this. But it's like, okay, is that higher vertical actually going to lead to what you want it to lead to? And are we having that realistic and real conversation with that athlete or not? Or is it just making too much sales and we're too much on this pathway of this like downhill momentum that we have going? And again, that's what they're worried about with AI right now. It's like they're worried that it's going to happen too fast for us to be able to stop and ever stop. And I feel like sports performance has reached a point to where like this momentum's just rolling. Like we're building systems on top of faulty systems on top of faulty systems to where we have people just say, like, just look at Twitter for 10 minutes. You're like, what in the world are we talking about? But that's why. It's because we never went back to the original system or the original goal. It's like we let this momentum take over for so long and we hyper focused on these small things for so long that to fix it, it's like Joel said, you almost have to go around it. You can't stay on that same pathway. You're going to get caught up in that momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I had a thought in there, but I think I lost it. But I agree, because you got me thinking about AI now. I was like, oh, we're talking about AI and the good hard sloppies, and I was like, well, where are we even going to be in like 5 or 10 years? As fast as AI escalates, what will all these things look like? So.
Well, and that was one of the things you talked about that I would like to go on that little thought experiment there too. I know you're saying maybe a different podcast, but I think it'd be a cool thought experiment. Like, where does that take you if our top of the branch right now, which is the NCAA, which is that scholarship, like what happens when that goes away? Like, and
Going away.
yeah, and it is, like the process of, I mean, right now with the NIL thing, like they're gonna get out of business if they go through that lawsuit, and it's tough. But like, what's your thought process there? Like, what are your like high arching philosophical thoughts there, Joel?
Yeah, I asked Paul Cater a question once, and it was, what would you do if this was 2,000 years ago? What would your job be? You know what I'm saying? Like, I think about that sometimes. And even, when you asked me at the beginning of the show, introduce myself, I'm like, what do I do? Exactly. Like, there's some different things, but what would I do if it was all this time in the past? Like, what archetypical value and skills do you bring
Mm.
in the midst of a system, like Trevor, like you said with baseball now, it's just sports that are so crazy, the sports system that is so crazy and does not have the joy and the well-being and the long-term joy of movement of the athlete at heart. It does not. It has the carrot at the end of the stick with the scholarship. I'm trying to kind of put together, I kind of almost lost my thoughts there. So where yeah, actually, Austin, sorry, you might have to ask me again because it's a lot, and I think my mind was going about 3 different directions. So please ask me again, and I will come back to reality.
Yeah. No, you're good. I get stuck in those. That we're stuck in the where Jordan Peterson, where you're going off on that conversation and you don't have it pre-programmed. So I'm all game for this. With AI, with the changes that are coming, and you were talking about how you asked Paul Cater what would your job be 2,000 years ago, and that's a really good question. I like that question because it's like in 2,000 years, it's absolutely not going to be exact. Like it's such a short-lived, like we got 100-year window of what sports performance is. Even in 100 years, you don't even have to go 2,000. Like what's it look like in 100 years? But yeah, your thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, you refocused me. Thank you. Yeah, so I asked Paul, what would you do? And he's like, I don't know, a shaman. But to that, I think there's such a profound, that was such a profound answer because it's really, what is the value of movement on all layers of your being? Like, to me, that is the core of that answer. And I'm like, I still think about that. I mean, he told me that like 3 or 4 years ago, and I still think about that because like you said, in like 50 years, are we going to look at this system that we have now and be like, oh man, like what were we doing? Or in a dystopia, we might be like, oh, that was great. Why can't we get back to that? Now we're all like half robot, and our programs are disseminated by AI or something. Whatever. Someone should write a novel about it, I guess. But yeah, I don't know where we're headed, but I think I know the solution. At least it always lies in the single training session. I think it's easy to get down on things. Like I listen to Metacrisis stuff, and I'm like, I get a little depressed, like thinking about all the things that are wrong with the world, to be honest. I'm like, man, what kind of world are my kids going to grow up in, or my grandkids? And, hopefully, I mean, I have faith in things. But to me, I think the beauty of it is that no matter what happens with the NCAA, the NIL, NCAA getting sued and Olympic sports going away or rosters cut. There was just a thing in the SEC, like swim rosters are going to get cut in half or something in light of a $2 billion settlement. And so what if that thing everyone was chasing goes away, or a lot of it, and I think to me, the thing that's always there is what right now, how can you make this session, maybe for lack of a better word, you could say heaven on earth, a phrase. Yeah, how can I make this the most beautiful session right now, right here with this group? And I think that's at the heart of any ceremony, you could say, like, whatever it is, like, and if those things can be there, and that's what I think Paul was so good at. Like, if you ever get a chance to train with Paul, like, he is so good at that. And he's spoken to that as almost the container of, I guess, a weight room, a strength and conditioning. I don't even know if I'd give it that term, but it's a container that exists outside of sport where you can have the most beautiful gameplay, movement, crush a citrus ghost and lift heavy. These are all feelings and experiences. It's not just lift heavy so I jump higher and accelerate better and hopefully get that scholarship. It's not just that, because honestly, if you purely think about it that way, I don't think athletes are thinking about that, to be honest. They're thinking, this is awesome. I like this environment. I love how it feels when I get a little caffeine in my system or listen to my favorite song and pick up a heavy weight. I love how it feels when I sprinted faster than I ever have. I love how it felt when we played that game. Hey, can we play that again? I just think so much lives there.
And as soon as you get out of that thought process as an athlete, burnout 1,000,000% happening. Like as soon as I've gotten out of any of that, as soon as I see an athlete getting out of those like thought processes and they start thinking about the logistics, or they start thinking about the money, or they start thinking about the scholarship, or they start thinking about their starting spot, it's over, dude. Like that sport is no longer fun for them. They're not going to put intent. They're going to constrict their movements. They're going to constrict their and the beautiful thing that made them solve the movement problems in this creative, fun, relaxed, fluid way, gone. They're focused on something else, and burnout happens and it's gone. So it's like, that's the thing that I really try to drive into the analytical world that we live in. It's like, we are stepping aside, but stepping aside, creating heaven on earth in a session is going to create good intent in a session, which is going to lead to good stimulus in a session, which is going to create a good athlete. We're just starting at a different spot rather than starting at the end and have them hyper focused on these small things, right? Because like you said, most athletes are not focused on it until they are. And when they are, and that's where, again, this is where I see it in college sports, a lot of those athletes are focused on those things only because they have to, because they get stuck in this survival based thought process of, oh fuck, if I don't, what will happen, all this pressure. And it's like, it's crazy. And again, the quicker you do that, the less good stim, the less heaven on earth you're creating. So the less results they get, the less they develop. The quicker you make that 14-year-old a pitcher only, the more they have to focus on only pitching strikes rather than becoming and developing a good rotational athlete, or just a good thrower of ball, or a enjoyer of baseball. Like, you lose all of these things that are eventually going to long-term lead to the branch. Again, that's why you start with the fundamentals. Your rant made me think of like the Brett Weinstein Heather, I can't remember her name, but the hunter gatherer.
I know her first name too. I cannot remember.
But their book of the hunter gatherer's guide to the 21st century. And one of the things, it's basically like, stick with the fundamental truths that have been here for a long time. What did movement look like 2,000 years ago? What did it look like 200 years ago? And what has just recently changed? And I feel like we are super hyper focused on the things that have recently changed, and we feel like those are the most important. It's like, dude, no, like, we've had movement for the entire human creation. Like, maybe let's focus on the things that have been here forever, and then we can dabble into new things. But I feel like we've thrown out the things that have been here forever, and we're only focused on the brand new. Okay, what is our counter movement jump like? Like, what is our squat like? All of these things are so brand new, but again, they're new gadgets and new toys for us coaches, so we get excited about them. But it's like, is that really the fundamental truths of movement? Is that really the thing that has stood the test of time? Or in 10 years, is that going to look stupid, just like a lot of the systems right now that we look at 10 years ago and laugh at look like, right? And I just think we do a poor job as coaches of realizing, like, oh, the things we swore by 10 years ago look ridiculous now, and that's only 10 years ago. But yet now you're in the moment, you're like, yeah, but we are way smarter. Like, we have the fucking answers now, dude. Like, we're so much smarter than those 10. Like, what do you think 10 years, like, 10 years from now, coaches are going to look like us. I just think we're putting too many of our eggs in these artificial, like made up baskets in the same exact way that coaches 10 years ago that you make fun of them for doing the bigger, faster, stronger programs, like, and only focusing on that. Now you're doing the same thing with maybe like an FMS program or a GOTA program, or knees over toes is the big one right now. You're putting all your eggs in these like brand new baskets, and it's like it's the same thing in 10 years. It's going to be a new basket rather than just focusing on these fundamental principles of movement.
Yeah, my thought, what that led me to is like, what happens when the kid realizes he's not going pro?
Mhm.
Oh shit. Oh, now what? You know what I mean? And that was kind of the shift I put on my guys last summer was, man, let's just train because we just want to train. Like, we're not going to think about how it's going to transfer to my swing. Like, you're going to go do that. You're going to go swing. You're going to go work on your hitting stuff. You're going to go work on throwing. And I tell you what, man, we had a blast last summer. The group lessened. It's like the more I try to push, hey man, like just come here, let's run fast, let's lift some weights, let's move, let's bend, whatever. The guys that like, this is going to sound terrible, the guys that kind of stink at the sport can't stand what I do. It's unbelievable. But if I was doing some super specific baseball thing, like, dude, I put in like a Cressy video for our college guys because I just program for them remotely. Oh man, this is the best training program ever. Because why? It had Cressy's name with a med ball throw. But like, if I were to put Trevor's med ball throw, oh, this is stupid. Why doesn't this work? But to go back to the original point, it's just like, you see these dudes, it happens. Well, they realize my goal was I want to go play pro baseball. And then you realize like, okay, you're just like right here, man. And now what? Like you said, now are you going to enjoy moving forever, or did you just do it as a means to an end to get to the pros, and now you're not going there, and now you have really nothing to fall back on?
Well, and then the thing that you mentioned there is like it's like the athletes that need this free base model are the athletes that swear it off. And I was that athlete, man. I was that athlete that really wanted to go pro, but just didn't have enough talent. And then I would just hyper focus on one specific aspect because I felt like I had to. Again, these these athletes feel like they're in this survival mode, and they probably are because of this coaching structure. It's like they know if they don't throw a specific number on, they don't hit a specific number on that radar, that they will not get the small amount of playing time that they already have. So they need to hyper focus on these small things without realizing it's like, oh, you're leaving so much on the table. And this is, again, I talk about this all the time. It's like the good athletes get better exponentially over and over again because they can play. They can play well, they play, like they're playing a game within the game itself, and they're doing these things fluidly. So they're allowing themselves access to these aha moments to where they do, rather than just forcing the 2-mile-an-hour gains in their throw. It's like they just do something because they're playing, they're messing around, they're doing things, they're relaxed when they're doing it. They throw it a different way one time, like, oh, this is it. This is how I throw this ball. This is how I hit this ball. And the more like you have to get those athletes that are in that survival mode to relax, to allow them to realize, dude, if you keep playing that linear game, you're not good enough to play that linear game. Like you're not. If you don't start allowing yourself to play this exponential game, if you don't find something new or something, this aha moment, if you don't allow yourself to go into those, it's never going to work. And that's a big realization for a lot of athletes. It's like, and again, I know it because I've been in it. It's like I knew I wasn't good enough, but then I thought I had to go linear. But then you're playing a linear game versus an exponential game against an athlete that's already better than you. That's a losing game. And I had shoot, I'm blanking on his name. Bobby White's counterpart of the coach. Oh,
Ross.
Ross. Yes, thank you. I had Ross on the podcast, and he said it in a beautiful way. He's like, we're not going for the linear game at all. Like we're going for that. You're not just trying to keep your starting spot. You're trying to become a all-star. I don't give a fuck where you're at. Like I don't
Yeah.
care if you're a bench player or what, but we're trying to find the thing that makes you an all-star, and that's what makes us different. Like we're trying, it's not to get your free throw percentage up to 70% so you have a role on the team. It's to get you to an all-star. You are the all-star on the team. You're playing in this mode. And as we're doing those things, the free throws will go up, and you'll find your spot. And at the end of the day, you stay the same athlete because again, you're still playing the linear game. You're still showing up the training. You're still like, you're already doing that. But now you're just giving yourself a chance at the lottery ticket to find the thing that could possibly make you an all-star, that could possibly make you a significantly better athlete than trying to force yourself through this linear process model.
Yeah. I think that also fits with the way that goal setting goes out. As long as I've been part of college teams in, the stopwatch sports, track and swimming, it's always interesting to hear people talk about their goals. Because they're always, I remember I'd hear people's goals on my track team. I was like, you're going to put 3 feet on your long jump this season? Like, they'd just be insane. Like, it was like this result of pressure. And it's not just that track team. I remember when I was at Cal, they had a swim meeting and when they were training at, in Colorado Springs on a training trip, and everyone on the team went around and gave their goals out. And after that meeting, I wasn't there, but the assistant coach joked, he's like, man, if we do 1/4 of what the guys said they were going to swim, we'd win nationals by 1,000 points. Like, because we always, I don't know, it's like for some reason we always it's so common to set this goal so high, but then at the first crack where you're not on that linear path anymore, everything folds. And I think it was even, I was watching a video with Isaiah Riviera, who did the 50-inch vertical jump on the Vertec, and he had said something about not actually setting those outcome goals because it would like mess him up or something like that. I don't know the exact words, but it was something to that tune. And that's where, yeah, just those process goals. But also, I was just thinking as you guys were talking, I think the body doesn't know, I wrote this down, is the body doesn't know numbers as much as it knows archetypes, like be the person, or like feeling like Trevor, what you said, these guys who they need somebody else with someone else's name on the exercise to accept it. I think a lot of times those are people who don't believe it in themselves, that they have it in them already, if that makes sense. Because I think all the good players, they don't need that stuff. They already know they're good, and they have a really, like what you said, Austin, there's the outer game and the inner game, and their inner game is so rich. Like they're playing an inner game, a rich inner game is running while they're playing. And I'm 40 now, and I was somebody who, when I played basketball in high school, I just escalated one thing as much as I could, jumping and sprinting and trying to be a little stronger, or a lot stronger, for as strong as I could get. And it was that one thing that outshot everything else. And if you looked at my parents dug up my stats a couple of years ago, they were cleaning out their house. I was like, wow, I was worse than I thought I was. I mean, it was terrible. So I just because I ignored everything else, but I also had a really poor, very poor inner game. And I've told this story, but like when my coach said you could be the star player in the other team for this practice, and I got to be that person. Just imagine I was that person. I made every shot, and it's just like it's just so interesting. I'm not trying not to go off a tangent. I feel like it kind of fits a little bit where I feel like it might fit with the conversation. I want to keep it in the realm, but I just love, Trevor, what you said about the joy that those Latin American players had. And I think that there's almost a different internal programming when you come up in a free play culture, Latin music, like joyfulness, because like Latin music is just so joyful and energetic.
Yeah.
And I think you just you have a different spring in your step. Your outlook is different when you come from there. I could imagine, I'm sure people who work with baseball players from different areas of the world, I'd be curious what they would say. I'd imagine it's probably very similar. The difference between an American player who's come up in the system versus someone who's played more and their whole country loved it and it was from a joy-based background. I think it changes how you internally, all this to say, I think it changes how you internally approach the inner game as you move forward in your sport.
And one of the things, Joel, that really got me thinking, it's like the inner game is absolutely developable. Like my inner game is the strongest it's ever been in my entire life in this moment right now because of the training. And like my inner game was absolutely piss poor before. And I think a lot of it's like proving it to yourself. But again, allowing yourself to enter into an environment in which you're allowed to prove it to yourself without getting completely shit on in the system, right? And ideally that's proven to yourself as you grow up, like in these like type settings. And I just remember inflection points where like as a really young player, I was like one of the only guys to score a touchdown with me and this other dude that we scored the touchdown, one random touchdown in like this 4th grade under the lights, like football game. Both of us were the only 2 players on our team to go play college football, right? It's crazy. Like it's insanity because like you had that inner game inflection point of you are a scorer of the football. You are like under the lights, you can play football, right? And we had so many better athletes. I mean, straight up logistically better athletes. We had a dude on our team that was running like a 10-4 in the 100 that never played college football. Like it's insanity, dude. Could catch the ball but like didn't have that inner game belief. But I really believe these things are trainable, and I really feel these things to be trainable in a system like a backyard games type system to where you are proving to this athlete over and over. You're not telling them they're great. Like again, the words are amazing. Talking to an athlete is amazing. This is all good stuff. I'm not saying throw it out, but really for me to feel it, I got to go do it. And that's one of the things like I talked about yesterday, like, or maybe 2 days ago. I was talking about taking cuts off a tee. For me, taking cuts off a tee grows my inner game to the maximum because I can see, oh, dude, you took 100 swings off this tee and you're a fucking animal, bro. You can put the ball wherever you want, regardless of if it's true with a live pitch or not. It's just the like inner game thought process of, oh, you can do this, dude. You can do this. And if you start on a level that's too high or it's just in a game based, you're not getting those reps. So you have this skill acquisition model where a tee is not going to be the best thing, right? It's very close based. It's very like far removed from the game. It's not going to be beautiful. But for me, it grows the story. Like, what's the stimulus I'm looking for? Probably the psychological benefit that I get from that of just proving to myself I can do that. And then I can put on the Batman mask when I walk onto the like into the game. And I'm like, I can do this. I know I can do this. I'm able to do this. I've done it a million times. And I think growing that in our athletes is one of the most powerful. Again, it goes back to the fundamental truth. How can you get that athlete to put the mask on and go do the hero's journey? And I think we've missed that. We've missed that 100%. Like we don't focus on these things.
Yeah.
I
think
mean, go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead, man.
I was just going to say, I think a good coach can sometimes see something in an athlete that athlete can at the time. And I think, especially even in coaching, even just in getting into team sport coaching in youth sports, it's kind of cool to see athletes go and perceive the game and how it fits with like, what they believe about themselves, their personality types, and just how powerful mentors can be, especially at a young age. And I think older too, as well, for sure. But there's in the hero's journey, you do need, I think a lot of times, that mentor who sees that thing in you and helps you to believe in yourself. And it's kind of like this upward spiral. Liz Gleadle is a Canadian javelin thrower. I've mentioned her on my podcast. She'll be on the podcast of mine shortly, but she talked about the path to mastery is an upward spiral because it has to capture all parts of you on the way up. You can't just improve one quality and work your way up the side of the tree or something. It's got to, belief systems and what you believe about yourself has to also come along as you go on your journey.
Well, that fits Paul Cater's "What would your role be 1,000 years ago?" Like the sage, well, it wasn't sage. What was it?
The shaman.
The shaman. Yeah, like I mean, it fits that role of being that mentor and seeing what they don't see, seeing that hero's journey before. Trevor, what were you going to say on that?
I was going to say, like, when you were talking about T work, and then we talk about looking back to the past for answers, like Cal Ripken Jr. was notorious for, like, he only hit off the tee in the offseason. But nowadays, someone would be like, that's crazy, but Cal Ripken was one of the best to ever do it. But it's like we've demonized that closed skill idea, when in reality, like, to me, when you were talking, it's like, but you can feel the control of the barrel. You can feel those little things that when you do step into the game or when you see the pitch coming, like, yes, like you said, you have that confidence. I know I can control the barrel. I know where my hands are going to be. And then I go out and practice hitting a moving ball. Boom, best of both worlds. Like golf, like I play golf and pickleball and then I train. So I like have these like three avenues of my life that are like pickleball, kind of intense. You talk about like just playing, competing. Golf, you have this true inner game. Like to me, it's all inner game, obviously some outputs, and then my training with Joel. And what I've noticed is like the more I become connected with the training and the movements, even if it has nothing to do with hitting a golf ball, which it doesn't. I mean, Joel, like you don't program like banded golf swings like to work on anything. Like, we don't do that.
Not yet.
But like I've noticed, man, like this year in Austin, I think you can relate a lot with the skill stuff is like I have been able to feel more things in my golf swing and when I'm playing pickleball than I did last year. Like but I think it once again comes back to the closed, you can call it closed, like sprinting, jumping, because it's not, I'm by myself. It's not super reactive. But I think having that as like my base and then working out to pickleball and golf, like it all meshes. Like to me, it's just it's all connected in that sense, which I think it's been really fun. Like that's been a super fun part of my journey, connecting.
Well, one of the things there too, I was talking to Cody Hughes about too. I think there's a difference in forced closed base drills and like going and doing those closed base drills to focus on feeling. Like I think there's a massive difference. Like having a coach tell me to go hit off a tee in a batting cage and like having a coach tell me to do something versus me spending time alone on my craft, focusing on the cue. Like I was talking to Cody, it's like I come up with so many cues in my head that I would never give an athlete. Like it would never work. It wouldn't like, but it's just something that clicked in my head in that moment that works. And sometimes it only works for 2 weeks, but I hold on to those cues for 2 weeks, then throw them out and go to the next one that I find within those 2 weeks. And they're never consistent. It's never the cue in and of itself. It's the thought process of that closed base drill alone. So, because we were talking about like doing A skips or not doing A skips, right? Like the closed base, like marching of an A skip. And what I was thinking about, same thing. It's like having a coach tell you to do an A skip and put your hands here and knees here, like is much different than you feeling something in that setting because you were just skipping and like fluid. And I'm like, wow, that's the same thing as baseball or any of these sports. It's like these closed based things, like spending time with your craft alone and internal having these cues and these thought processes and the way that you think about movement and the way that you feel movement is so much different than having that implanted on you. And that's where I have the issue with the A skips, or I have the issue with the T work or whatever it is in the closed based setting. It's like when a coach is telling you their experience or what they want you to experience versus your own experience in these settings and your own movement options in these settings. Because again, I have so many athletes that even something with an A skip or something with sprinting, they'll tell me, yeah, I thought about this, and you watch it on video and it's nowhere near. And I do the same thing with my T. It's like, I thought about like swinging at this, and it's like, I'm not doing any of that, but I'm getting the result that I want because it's this weird like connection and thought process. But it's, we think one thing and produce another. But if that thought produces the movement that we want, it's great. I just think we run into the issue where the coach is implementing that thought that is disconnected from the outcome that we have. And then it's this weird disconnect. I told you to put your knees higher, but you're running slower. Like, what's happening there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that's a distinguishing factor, and I guess you could say Western or Eastern thought on education. Like we live in this world, it's very like teacher says something, say it back to them. It's very like, and that's how everyone coaches too. Hey, I got this, show me the thing back with your body, and you tell them or whatever. Eastern, I like to think of it as almost like, I mean, you hear the stories of like the person going to study from the Zen master, and the first like month they just make them wash the place. They don't even tell them anything. And then like the student might ask the master something, and usually the master answers in a riddle. Like he doesn't tell them. He's going to say something that you have to think about yourself for a while. And eventually it clicks for you. And a lot of times in your own way that's meant for you. But I don't, from my understanding, I don't think like people are paying the Zen It's like again, the system. It's like that's something that can happen because it's not necessarily, it's not a purely transactional. Hey, I'm paying you this money, so give me the answer. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what sometimes that just gets facilitated in the sense of we feel like whatever position we're in, like we have to give athletes the answer. I think especially even more so maybe if it's a little bit more private sector, perhaps, I think you can have that relationship with your athletes where they're like, all right, coach isn't going to give me the answer, and they know it, and I think that just becomes part of the culture. Like you have to learn this yourself. And I even on my own end of things, like with the whole rote practice on your own, I used to shoot in my backyard all the time. Know their players, playing basketball. I would have been better if I played against other players more often. But the interesting thing is I remember one of the moments that sticks out the most to me in my career is I hit a game winner against one of the other top teams in the conference. When this play fell apart at the end of the game, they just chucked it to me in the corner and I hit like a jump shot 17-footer. And I hit that because I had that automatic. It's things that go unconscious and automatic, and you're confident. And all the self-sabotaging pieces of my brain went away because it's like a failed play. So if I miss this anyway, who cares? And then the thing that I had practiced over and over again was able to shine through. And if I wouldn't have practiced over and over again, I don't know if I would have had those capacities. So I also think about like, Trevor, you mentioned Cal Ripken, Mickey Mantle. He was a miner in like an Oklahoma mining town he grew up in. Mickey Mantle hit like the farthest recorded. I think it's like dubious exactly how they measured it, but like massively, massively far home runs, over 500 feet or well over 500. And he grew up in a mining tower. Just here's a hammer, like hit the rocks until you're tired. You're not like measuring outputs or someone's telling you how to swing. And then you hand the rock to the other guy and he goes for as long as he goes. You just go back and forth, right? And then imagine doing that in the confidence that you have, and you feel a bad, like, damn, this thing's light as hell. Like I'm gonna beat the shit out of this ball, Or even like I was, my wife wanted me to chop we're making planter beds in our side yard, and we're like chopping up some wood to have like layers of like wood and then soil in the beds. And so I haven't swung an axe in forever, but I do a crap ton of like loaded club bell swings, like 45 pounds all the time, twice a week. And I pick up that axe. It's just funny because at first I'm like not hitting the thing very well. Like I'm all over the place. But once my body's settled in, all that strength and confidence from the club bell swing, I was smashing the shit out of like I was feeling like I would put me on Instagram right now. Like, bam, like it's just from all that practice, and then your body can funnel it into that thing in the moment. I mean, and if it can't, then you find the bridge, which is there's something in the perception action chain. But yeah, I think there's definitely value there. And yeah, doing things by yourself as well. I just think there's so much there that goes unstated.
And I love the thought process of like, you almost had to advertise yourself as like, you have to, it's a weird dynamic because you have to, this is what I advertise basically. You are paying me for me to make you find the answer. Like, I'm not finding the answer for you, like, and that's a weird like transaction, like, why am I paying you type thing? But long term, it's still getting the result that you want. And I think that's what you have to sell the athlete on. That's what you have to sell the program on, is long term, we're getting what you want in a much more a much better way and much more like long-term played where you actually have the answer. But it is a weird like American system to where they are paying you, and it's like it's almost like they're trying to shortcut the system when they do that. Like, they're paying you for the answer from to go to A to B, and it's like, no, that's not what we're going to do here. And actually advertising it, but it's super powerful once you get the athletes into that setting and they are finding the answer. Like, even as simple, like they're just used to being spoon fed. And I think you can definitely train that out of the athletes and out of the system. You just have to say, no, like, I'm not going to go do that. And then you get a confused look on the athlete's face, and then they find the answer themselves. And then they come back to you like, oh, that's why you did that. It's so much better. Like this hero story 101. But coaches, this was awesome. We just ripped an hour 23, hour 30 almost. This was, I think we ripped. I think this was good. Thank you guys for being on.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Austin.
And Joel, we should probably tell them we got a conference coming up next week.
Yeah, we do. Be there.
Be there. Buy your tickets.
Like a Citrus Ghost with me and Austin.
Yeah. So we're gonna do a Citrus Ghost off when we start. It's gonna have all of our philosophies. I got like 200 slides made right now that I gotta funnel down a significant amount, but we got great memes. We got all of our philosophies there. Trevor's gonna be there as well with us. And it should be amazing. Should be an amazing time.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. I hope everyone listening, if you're hearing this before the seminar, I hope you're within reasonable proximity, or if you're not, I hope to see you there.
Welty, you have no excuse. I will post the link to sign up for the conference in the bio. This will be posted tomorrow. So, I mean, they still got almost 10 days to sign up, so they're good there. No excuses if you guys are listening to this. I will see you guys in Cincinnati. Let's do this. Appreciate you guys watching. Appreciate you guys being on. Keep chopping wood.